All right, let's just jump right in. Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're not just dusting off some dry ancient history. We are literally decoding an ancient survival guide for the afterlife. Because for the ancient Egyptians, death absolutely wasn't the end. It was this incredibly complex, incredibly high-stakes transition. And to actually pull that transition off successfully, well, you had to understand exactly what you were made of.
Now, what's truly fascinating here is how incredibly modular the ancient Egyptian identity was compared to how we think today. Today, we generally think of the soul as this single, monolithic spiritual entity, right? You were just you. But the Egyptians? No way. They believed human identity was fractured into 9 distinct, interconnected parts. It's kind of like a giant complex machine, and if even one single gear broke down, your chances of surviving eternity were completely destroyed.
So, to make sense of this whole intricate spiritual anatomy, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the magic of creation, then look at the physical vessel, dissect your personality and vital essence, face the ultimate judgment, and finally, figure out how to actually achieve eternal life. Let's get into it.
First up, the magic of creation.
Okay, so to truly understand how the Egyptians viewed death, we actually have to rewind and look at how they viewed the spark of life at the very beginning of creation. According to their myths, the god Atum created the world out of total chaos, using his own magic, which they called Heka. And because the earth was formed with this magic, they believed the entire world was literally imbued with it. So when humans were created, that magic took the form of the soul. Basically, every living person was believed to carry a literal piece of this eternal, cosmic magic inside them. It's the foundational battery of human existence. So the crucial question is, how does this cosmic magic translate into your personal identity? Well, that brings us to the Ren, or your name. To the Egyptians, a name wasn't just a label, it was a fundamental piece of your soul. Think of it kind of like your ultimate digital footprint today. If your name was carved into a stone statue, boom, that statue became a backup body for your soul. But if your enemies came along and chiseled your name off your monuments, absolute catastrophe. Obliterating the Ren completely destroyed your connection to the physical world and ruined your afterlife. They literally feared the erasure of their personal brand more than death itself. But a name and a magical spark aren't quite enough to survive eternity. You need a physical anchor.
Which brings us to part 2, the physical vessel.
This is the Khet, the physical body. Now, we all know about mummies, but mummification wasn't just some quirky ancient burial practice. It was an absolute necessity for survival. The physical form had to exist so the spiritual parts of the soul could retain their intelligence and actually stand for judgment in the underworld. And this perfectly highlights a massive ancient social divide. Preserving the Khet was so absolutely vital that families spent huge, staggering fortunes on it. The ancient historian Herodotus actually noted that grieving families would literally choose from a menu of mummification options based on what they could afford. You had everything from the super deluxe Osiris package all the way down to a basic budget preservation.
And attached to that physical body is a piece of the soul you might never have even considered, the shut, or the shadow. Because a shadow is always cast by the physical body, the Egyptians figured, hey, it must contain a piece of a person's essence. Ancient texts sometimes depict it as this thin black silhouette, or even, and I love this detail, as an ostrich feather sunshade. It's just a wonderful, vivid detail that shows how incredibly thorough and literal their view of identity really was. If it's attached to you, it's a part of your soul.
Moving right along to Section 3, Personality and Vital Essence.
Now ask yourself for a second, what exactly makes you, you? It's not just your body or your name, it's your drive, your character. And that brings us to the real psychological core of the Egyptian soul. First, we have the Ka. This is your vital essence, the literal life force that distinguishes a living person from a dead one. The Egyptians believed a god named Khnum actually crafted your Ka on a potter's wheel and placed it inside your mother at birth. But here's the really fascinating part. Just like your physical body, your Ka gets hungry. Even in death, it needed to be sustained by food and drink. That is exactly why ancient tombs often featured soul houses, these little models where families would leave real offerings. The Ka didn't eat the physical food, obviously, but it consumed the spiritual essence of the meal.
Right alongside the Ka is the Ba, which is essentially your personality. It's everything that makes you totally unique. The Ba is famously depicted in hieroglyphs as a bird with a human head. And it wasn't just a piece of you, in many ways it was you. The idea of a purely immaterial, invisible soul was just so totally foreign to the Egyptians that they imagined the Ba literally flying out of the tomb during the day to participate in the world of the living before flying back to the mummy at night.
So let's trace the journey of the soul to see how all this builds into the actual mechanics of dying. When you die, your vital essence, the Ka, immediately leaves the body, but your personality, the Ba, is trapped inside. To fix this, priests had to perform a really vital ritual called the opening of the mouth. This was a magical ceremony meant to reanimate the senses of the mummy, allowing the Ba to finally be released. Only then could the Ba and Ka fly off to eventually reunite. But reuniting those parts wasn't a guarantee. First, you had to pass the ultimate climax of the afterlife journey. This is where the threat of permanent death gets very, very real.
Section 4. The Ultimate Judgment.
To even survive this terrifying judgment, you desperately needed your ib, your heart. During mummification, the brain was usually just scrambled and discarded. But the heart was meticulously preserved and left inside the chest. Why? Because the heart was believed to be the absolute, undeniable record of all your deeds on earth. It was your key to the underworld, and it was going to provide evidence, either for you or against you, in the high court of the gods.
So picture this. Imagine standing before Anubis, the jackal-headed god of the dead. Your actual heart is placed on a scale and weighed against the feather of Maat, which represents truth and cosmic order. The tension here is insane. Will your heart betray you? Will it confess your worst, darkest sins? Because if your heart was heavy with guilt, it wouldn't just mean a bad afterlife. It meant your heart would be instantly devoured by a horrifying crocodile-headed monster named Emmet. Your soul would become eternally restless. We're talking permanent, absolute death. No second chances.
So, how do you handle a life-or-death test where your own conscience is the star witness against you? Well, you cheat. And honestly, this shows us something so incredibly human. The ancient Egyptians were so terrified of their own hearts snitching on them that they invented a magical loophole. They carved these heavy heart scarabs out of stone, inscribed them with specific spells, and securely wrapped them right over the mummy's chest. The explicit magical purpose of this scarab was to physically and magically force the heart to keep its mouth shut and not confess to any sins during the weighing ceremony. It is a literal ancient hack for the ultimate judgment. Okay, so let's assume your heart scarab worked. Your body's preserved, your name is intact, your Ba is flying free, and you just passed the ultimate test. What happens next?
We enter the final phase, achieving eternal life.
Once you're actually found worthy, your physical body generates a spiritual counterpart called the Sa. This is the form you use to interact with all the other entities down in the underworld. But you know, the Sa wasn't always just some peaceful ghost. It could actually act as a furious, avenging spirit, completely capable of returning to the world of the living to settle old scores or haunt the people who wronged them.
Seriously, we have primary sources showing just how absolutely terrified the living were of these spirits. Listen to this haunting excerpt from a letter written by a Middle Kingdom widower to his dead wife. He is begging her restless spirit to leave him alone. He writes, "What wicked thing have I done to thee? I wept exceedingly. I gave linen clothes to wrap thee and left no benefit undone." He is literally writing a letter, leaving it at her tomb, begging her sad to stop haunting him because, hey, he paid for a really good funeral. It just goes to show how incredibly real and interactive they believed this multi-part soul was.
But if everything goes perfectly right, if the tomb is in order, the rituals are pure, and you pass the judgment, we reach the ultimate goal. The Ba and the Ka finally reunite to create the Ak. The Ak roughly translates to the magically effective one, or a being of radiant light. This is your pure intellect existing as a living entity. For a successful Egyptian, becoming an Ak meant you had finally escaped all the horrific perils of the underworld. All those fractured pieces of the soul we talked about, they finally locked together, unifying to achieve a permanent, luminous eternity. They genuinely believed the fully formed ox would ascend into the heavens, literally taking their place as the indestructible stars shining in the night sky.
It's just a breathtaking way to look at human existence, isn't it? The Egyptians understood that we are complex, multifaceted beings. We're driven by physical needs, by our personal legacy, by our moral compass, and by a vital spark of magic. So as we wrap up this explainer today, I really want to leave you with this thought to ponder. If your soul was divided into 9 pieces today, which part of your identity do you think would be strong enough to endure eternity?